Hi guys, thanks for joining us again. Today, it's a great topic. It's something which I did get to learn about working in the health and fitness industry, but it's something I wish I knew a little bit more about before I started teaching. And that is, of course, the topic of motivation. Today, I've brought in my friend Theo, and we're going to discuss the topic. Now, before we start, let me tell you a little bit about Theo. He has a master's in applied linguistics, a graduate diploma in TESOL. He speaks Mandarin, and he's currently studying Korean. Is that correct?
That's right.
Excellent. So thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Josh.
My pleasure. Let's start easy, shall we? Let's start with a really easy question. Now, guys, it sounds easy, but you're about to find out. You ready, Theo? Here it comes.
Shoot.
What is motivation?
Basically, motivation is that which gives behavior strength, purpose, and sustainability. It's hard to give a single definition for motivation simply because it can be approached from so many different angles. However, what all researchers can agree on is that it is very important for language learning.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that sounds fair enough. Couple of things there. First, you said that it's very hard to define. There are many definitions. And guys, if you're looking at the screen right now, I've put a few up there for you. So I think that's quite interesting. Secondly, you said that all researchers agree that motivation is really important for learning a second language, which again, we both totally agree on that, as would most people. But why is it so?
Well, I think as anyone who's seriously tried to tackle learning a language can tell you, it's a long and often tedious process, that can take years or even a lifetime. In my own experience of learning Chinese, even after 20 years, there are still things I struggle with. So I think if there isn't sufficient motivation, then even having a great teacher or an aptitude for languages, these things aren't likely to lead to a high level of success. On the other hand, being highly motivated can compensate for less than ideal language learning conditions. And research has shown that motivation is consistently a strong predictor of language learning success.
Oh, look, I think everything you said there not only makes sense when we think about it, but it's really important for teachers to know because, I mean, I worked in the health and fitness industry and I learned a lot about motivation, but I didn't really know how to apply it or anything like that in the classroom. So just thinking of what you said there, I think if the teachers listening or watching this video, keep these ideas in mind, and we're going to just move on now and discuss some of the ways motivation can be approached. Theo.
Sure. Well, one of the earliest approaches classified motivation into integrative and instrumental motivation. Integrated motivation is motivation to learn a language in order to get to know, interact, and perhaps become like the speakers of the target language. And instrumental motivation, on the other hand, refers to learning a language more for pragmatic or practical reasons.
Okay, so the integrative way is I'm learning French because I want to engage with the French-speaking community because that's something I want to do.
Right.
Whereas the instrumental reason would be I want to maybe pass a French exam or get a job in a French company.
That's right. But it's also important to note that not everyone who learns a language does so because they want to integrate with members of the target culture. So another way that motivation has been classified is into different degrees of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
Okay, so what would that be?
Well, intrinsic motivation refers to doing an activity because it is inherently satisfying, and extrinsic motivation is essentially the same as instrumental motivation, that is, doing something as a means to an end.
Okay, so intrinsic motivation is internally driven?
Yes.
And extrinsic motivation is because, again, I want to pass an exam, or I'm really trying to get this job, so I really need to learn English, so that's my goal.
That's right. And in most cases of language learning motivation, we have a mixture of intrinsic and extrinsic influences.
Okay, what about from your own, can you give us a little anecdote or a little story from your own experience?
Yeah, for example, an extrinsic reason for why I'm learning Korean right now is to make my life in Korea more comfortable. But I'm also learning it because I genuinely find the language itself interesting. So this is an intrinsic reason.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm learning Korean as well, and much the same. I have intrinsic reasons. Well, sort of, I enjoy learning languages, and I guess as a extrinsic motivator, I really want to be able to have the power to go and do my own banking, and if I need to go to the dentist, instead of always just asking someone. So I want to become self-sufficient.
Totally, yeah.
So we can both agree on that one. That's our big extrinsic motivator. But moving on, attribution theory.
Oh, before we get to that, I just wanted to add that even though both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are useful for learning language, what we see is that high-level language learners tend to be more intrinsically motivated.
Okay, well, I mean, that makes perfect sense. If you want to do it, then, of course, you're going to do it. But that's not to say, teachers out there, if people are really extrinsically motivated, that's not to say that's not going to really help guide them and help motivate them to learn. We're just saying that the results do show that intrinsically motivated students get better results. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so attribution theory.
Right. Well, attribution theory relates to the way that people think about their past successes and failures and how that influences their motivation going forward in future activities. If people attribute their past successes and failures to factors that they can control, then this is a more positive indicator of future motivation than if they attribute them to factors outside their control.
Okay, well, that makes perfect sense. So to illustrate the point, I've just done an exam, I've failed. So if I attribute my success or failure, so I've failed this exam, and I can say, oh, the exam was too hard, or what else? The teaching wasn't good quality.
I had a crap teacher.
Yeah. Okay, so there I'm putting the blame on an external factor, on something I can't control, where it's probably better to take ownership.
Yeah, I think part of what we do as teachers is to promote autonomy, to help students become more responsible for their own learning.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And I think one of the things I do, it's not attribution theory, but it is something which I like to do with my adult students, is I get them to think about their future self or their ideal self when we're learning a language, whether they're intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. I get them to think what they want to do with the language. Do they, like, I'm learning French, I want to sit in a cafe and speak French to the waiter or watch a French movie. I imagine myself doing this. So we've covered a few of the main ones there.
Yeah, but that's just some of the ways we can look at motivation. I think if you're interested in finding out more, you should check out the link.
Oh, definitely. I've got a lot of resources there for you guys, especially if you do want to know more. So now we've gone through what motivation is, we've looked at why it's important, and we've discussed some of the ways we can view motivation. But let's get to the reason we're all here. We want to know the more practical side, how we can really help our students and how we can use this sort of knowledge in our classes. So let's start with the opposite of motivation, which is, of course, unmotivation. Theo, what do you think contributes to unmotivated or demotivated students? What are your main thoughts?
Well, I think the big one is lack of intrinsic motivation. But there's also, contributing to that is poor quality teaching. This can include not caring about the students, having poor quality resources, not having interesting classes, and so on.
Yeah, and I think if, as teachers, we can really work on teaching the right level, having interesting materials, etc., the intrinsic motivation of our students will go up. People want to go to classes that they enjoy. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's now look at how we can promote motivation.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Exactly right. So, how do we promote motivation within our students? Theo, I'm going to leave this one to you.
Okay, well, I have here the 10 Commandments of Motivation. This was in an article by Dörnyei and Sizer. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. These were two very prominent researchers in language learning motivation. So to begin, number 1, set a personal example with your own behavior. Create a pleasant, relaxed atmosphere in the classroom. present the tasks properly, develop a good relationship with the learners, increase the learners' linguistic self-confidence, make the language classes interesting, promote learner autonomy, personalize the learning process, increase the learner's goal-orientedness, and familiarize learners with the target language culture.
Okay, great. So a couple of those there I actually do lectures on. I do one on culture, so check it out, and I do one on confidence, so check those out. But Theo, for the sake of running out of time, because we are running out of time, how about I ask you for, say 3? Can you do 3 that you'd like to elaborate on?
My top 3? Okay, so number 1 is to create engaging lessons. So by this I mean vary the activities and the medium, make the lessons relevant to your students. And I know this is not always possible, but if you can, try to get out of the classroom. Number 2, be a good role model. Be prepared and well organized for class. Be consistent, be professional. And finally, number 3, build a good rapport with your students. So you can do this simply by taking a genuine interest in your students. How about you, Josh? What are your tips?
Well, I agree, obviously, with the top 10 list, and I agree with the ones you've elaborated on. We've got to keep our classes fun, keep them interesting, care about our students. But the big one for me is all about goal setting. Now, a lot of people, it comes the start of the year, everyone sets goals. People go to the gym and they set a goal. People, they have a goal to learn a language. But what a lot of people forget is that's just the product goal. That's what we want to achieve. I think we really need to encourage our students to look at the process goal. We can't get the product without having a process of how we're going to get it. If we want to lose 2 kilos, I can't just simply say, oh, my goal is to lose 2 kilos. I actually have to have an action plan. This is what I think a lot of people don't do. A lot of teachers, they say, oh, what's your goal? Great. And they might visualize it, but we also need to look at the journey. With language, of course, it's encouraging our students to study as often as they can, and even more than that, and set little mini goals along the way. So guys, remember that product is what we want, but we need a process to get there. Guys, I think we're out of time. Theo, thank you for joining me for this lesson. Well, it's more of a lecture than a lesson.
Yeah, well, it's been my absolute pleasure.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And that's it from us. Guys, check out the rest of the videos. Remember, keep your classes fun, keep them interesting, and check out the links on motivation. We'll see you soon.